Today we're going to be going over Autodesk Docs and primarily the way that we're able to create a centralized data environment by using this platform. So what that means is just one single area where all stakeholders on a project, whether you're a trade partner, general contractor, engineer, architect, so on, a place where you can share your information and hold people accountable with maximum transparency, just trying to build up a more consistent project with better efficiency, better safety, and just better accountability as you go through. So the first thing we want to ask ourselves when we talk about Autodesk Docs is, what even is it? And essentially, Autodesk Docs is a centralized platform for file sharing. It's pretty similar to some other options that are out there, but it's solely built for projects and the construction industry and anything else around that. So what you're going to be seeing here is document sharing to trade partners from general contractors. Anybody who needs whatever they need, it's all going to be saved for them on Autodesk Docs. We're trying to make this the perfect environment for everybody to share their information in a timely manner, while also tracking all of the updates to those files and all of the changes that have been made so that your project is updating in real time as you go through. So you can see we also have one site for enabling document transmittal and review. So what this is going to do is help you share things to all members of your project and make sure that the things that are on the platform have been reviewed by everybody on there, so that what's being put on Autodesk Docs is actually correct and it's actually supposed to be there. So again, just holding us to that accountability standard and the transparency of when things are where they need to be. Throughout the rest of this webinar today, we're going to be covering the main components of the Docs platform. That's going to be what you see here: the files, reviews, transmittals, issues, and reports. If you are familiar with the Autodesk Construction Cloud, you'll know that these all also kind of work with other components of the cloud, like Autodesk Build, and it works back and forth between those two components of Build and Docs. So as Melissa and I go through, like Lori said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or put them in the chat, and we will circle back to those at the end. But for now, I'm going to pass this off to Melissa real quick, and she's going to get us started on files.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started with files. This is a pretty simple and straightforward tool, but it is key to a successful project. The file module allows us to manage all documents in our project and allows us to share all the right information with all project members. You can also share files with those who are not members of Docs, just depending on the permissions of folders. And by using a cloud-based platform, we can increase efficiency, improve quality, and reduce risk, which would save us a lot of time and money in the project. Files allows us to customize all folder structures based on your specific needs. And it is important to note that only project admins have permissions to create, edit, and manage folders, as well as set permissions to these, while users can only upload, view, and download files depending on their permission levels. So permissions and access to folders can be limited to specific groups who need different access levels. To the right, you can see what the module looks like within ACC, and this is a really great example of what the files could look like in a project. Everything is clearly separated by folder and subfolder, and let's say that you don't want a specific subcontractor to have access to each and every folder within the design models, the 0-1 design models. Docs allows you to assign permissions based on roles, individual members, or by company. So it is very easy to limit the amount of information or files that certain trade partners have access to. Having everything in a centralized location allows us to reduce the amount of time that we sometimes spend searching for certain documents. And it is available to view not only in the office using the web browser, but also while walking in the field using a tablet. And two last things to note before passing it on to Shane is that Docs supports more than 60 2D and 3D file formats. So this allows us to view and navigate easily through 3D models or 2D drawings in the field or through the web. And if you do work with any BIM or VDC tools, you know how important it is to get that coordinated model to the field. So Docs really makes it easy to do so with the files. And as Shane mentioned earlier, all the documents that are uploaded within the files module is shared not only within Docs, but also across products in the Autodesk Construction Cloud platform, such as Build, Cost Management, AutoSpecs, and Shane.
Yeah, so once you get those files onto the platform, you might be asking yourself, how do you know that that file is what you really need to be using? How do you know that that's the right piece of the puzzle that you need to be doing, whether it's a spec section that's been uploaded, the correct drawings, or anything else? Because you don't want to be using the incorrect drawings while you're walking around with your iPad trying to mark up sites. And that's where this component of Autodesk Docs comes in. And this is going to be our review module. So the review module is essentially, and you'll notice this as we go through, the names of the modules are exactly what they are. So this is going to be how you review those documents once they're up and running on the platform. This is going to help because when you have hundreds of people working on your project and you've allowed hundreds of people to have upload permissions, how do you know what really is the gold standard of what you want to be using on your project? Yeah, we're trying to eliminate the back and forth of, oh, I couldn't find this, or I used this file and it was actually out of date. So that's where reviews comes in. The review process is going to be, it'll be dictated by your project administrators, but essentially it's going to be an organized workflow that passes your file through a set process. And we'll look at that on the next slide as well. But these processes can be multi-tiered, it can go to individuals, and it can go to groups. And what this is going to do is get as many eyes as possible on those files to make sure that that's the correct standard that people are going to be using throughout the duration of your project. It'll always be updated, and you'll probably hear us talk about this a couple of times throughout the webinar, but everything gets stored with a revision history. So you'll always be able to see what version of the file you're on and whether that has been reviewed. But the main portion of reviews that's important is that this is going to allow people to have real-time tracking of where that document is in the review process, who's in charge of the review process, and whether or not it's been approved or denied. So if I, as a subcontractor, am hopping on there and I need to look at a set of drawings and I see, okay, it hasn't quite been reviewed yet, but this person, let's say on this screen, Richard, is in charge of the review. I can get a hold of Richard and say, hey, where are we at with this? How soon can we get this reviewed? I need to start using this today. So I would be able to push that process along, hopefully, or at least get his input, and he could say, you know, hold off, not yet. We're going to have to kind of review a few other things and maybe make some changes. So really, we're just trying to add a level of certainty to your project by verifying that all of the files and the content, the Revit models, the CAD files that are posted onto Autodesk Docs are correct and applicable to the project that you're looking at the time. So this is going to be kind of a pretty broad example of the different workflows that we're able to do in the reviews module. So you can see the top one is just a one-step approval, and the bottom one is a four-step group approval. So this can go all the way up to a 5 or a 6-step approval or a 5-step group approval. And what this is going to do is pass it through, let's say in this one-step approval, a project manager for a general contractor. When we get down into a group approval phase, let's say it bumps through a project engineer, project manager, and then an architectural team who needs to do just a quick little scan over it and double check everything. Then they'll kick it back to the project manager to give it that final approval and send it out to everybody on the project who needs it. Once it's been reviewed, those people are going to be able to see, okay, perfect, this is the exact item that I want to use. Now when I'm walking around on the field, I'm using the most up-to-date plans that I actually need to use. And when you're creating reviews on the platform, they do carry a lot of information. So we pulled a couple of different samples here, and you have the view of what it looks like when you are acting as a subcontractor who you can see lacks the permission to actually submit the review. Here on this one, I've done my part. I now just have to wait for it to go to the next stage before I can actually get eyes back on it. and then what it looks like for the reviewer to have their access as well. So now that that has been completed in the review phase, you can see on here we have the name of the document, as well as this really cool progress and activity box down below. So what this is going to do is show you that that document is in phase 1 of its review, phase 2 of its review, and you can see the exact date and time that those reviews are happening. So again, going back to what I said at the beginning of transparency and accountability, you're going to know exactly where something is and who's responsible for it. And it's just going to help you when things are kind of hitting the fan, because we know how construction goes, and it always happens at some point. You're going to be able to go back to one specific person, one specific company, and say, this is when you had your information, this is when you were supposed to use it, and this is what happened. So again, just creating that full central database for you to be using as you're going through your project. And once you create these reviews and with all of the files that you have as well, you're going to be looking to send those out to people. And what that's going to be is our transmittal slide, or our transmittals module, excuse me, which Melissa is going to talk about next, so that we can see how that's going to work as well.
So for anyone who's not familiar with a transmittal, this is just a formal means of sending files to another project member or project team. The Transmittals tool within Docs creates a centralized record of when we sent the files to other project members or project teams. As we all know, communication is key in every project, specifically a construction project, and having record of this is extremely important. So this tool allows us to keep record of all communication via transmittals, and the module makes it very easy to search through these based on who sent them and when. So let's say you want to send a revision of the construction documents to the project team. A transmittal leaves no room for error, and using Docs, you can really track who it was sent to, who sent it and when, the status of it, as well as multiple other fields. So as you can see here in the screenshot below the text, Docs gives you all the information related to that transmittal, as well as the history with all the details. So as you can see in the right, Shane sent it to me, and you can see the date, you can see how many files, you can see the path. So it was sent directly from the project files, and you can see that I received it and reviewed it. So you can search with description, the path of the file, version, review status, updated by, etc. When you create a transmittal, anyone with the right permission can review these files, track any previous versions of it, and stay on top of the latest updates. And as I mentioned before, project admins need to set up these permissions depending on who needs access to these files.
Yeah, so that pretty much sums up where we're at with our file sharing portion of it. What we're going to get into next is the issues module of Autodesk Docs. And Autodesk Docs issues is, again, like I previously said, it's named extremely appropriately. It's here to define exactly what issues there are on your project. And so what this is going to do, issues encompass different portions of your project. So you can see down on the one below, I have some general type issues, design errors, ADA compliance on this particular project. So all of these issues are able to be personalized, or I'm trying to think of a better phrase than that, for your project itself. So they can be made custom in case you have any kind of random issues on one project that maybe you don't experience on all of your other ones. Your project administrators are able to go in and create various types of issues. And the way that this also feeds back into our centralized data environment is if you're using Autodesk's Project Insights tool on any of your projects, these issues are going to become compiled on your Project Insights. So what that's going to do is tell you exactly how many safety issues you have, how many design issues, what companies are actually facing these issues, and how frequently they're showing up. So again, feeding back into accountability as well. If one company is consistently having quality issues, you're able to kind of hunt them down and say, what's the deal here, what's going on, and how can we help you get through these issues so that our project can keep moving forward. And similar to every other portion of Autodesk Docs that we've looked at, it does flow back and forth between multiple different modules as well. So it's going to feed into your build, it's going to feed into your project insights, and it's just going to expand the data that you have attached to a project. And that's one thing that I talk about a lot with my clients is the more data that you put into a project, the more data you're going to be getting out of it, which we'll look at next when we get into our reports tab as well. The issues module is completely customizable by the project administrators in the sense that they can make it so only certain members of a project, people with certain role definitions, or people from a certain company are able to create, assign, or edit these issues. So depending on what your permissions are, you may be able to create an issue but not actually assign it to another company, or you may only be able to create issues for your own company. In either case, the project administrator or whoever has management permissions over those issues, they are then able to go in and assign it to the correct person. So if you're facing an issue and we're going to try to eliminate all of the emailing back and forth about who is responsible for this and when did we find out about it. It's going to be on this platform and somebody's going to be able to assign it exactly to the company that needs to see it. And if they believe that it's not actually their responsibility, they can kick it back to the project administrator or whoever has the management permission over issues. And they can say, you know, don't blame us, we're the plumbers, head this over to framing and see what they can do about it. So with all of that being said, this module is really working to enhance the efficiency that you see on a project and make sure that the correct parties have the necessary information to resolve these issues and to move things forward. We want your projects to move forward quickly and efficiently. If you have a lot of safety issues on here, let's address those. Let's see why you're having so many safety issues and start getting your guys to have a little bit of a better safety track record and keep them safe while they're working for you. You know, construction is a team sport, and if you're not protecting your team, then that's going to come back on you. So using the issues tool is really going to help with safety as one, but also all of your design and your clash coordination as well. So once you kind of get the insight into which team members and companies are experiencing these issues, you're able to narrow things down a lot more to just have a more smoothly operating project and create more value for everybody involved. You know, the faster we get a project done with the fewest issues, the more money it goes back into every company. And as I said before, when you put a lot of information into your issues tool, it's going to feed back into the reports and the different tools that you're able to use across the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So on Autodesk Docs specifically, these reports are designed to encompass all of these issues and all of the issues that you're having on your project. So we'll look at a sample of this next, but essentially what it's going to be is a comprehensive rundown of everything that you have going on, every issue that you have going on that project. This is a great tool for project management teams to be able to take, and they can print it out and put it in a book, and they can give it to their ownership or any other stakeholders in the project who actually need to experience and see what is actually going on their project. So within the reporting tool, you have the option to sort data down in multiple ways, and you can change up what goes into those reports. So if you're working with a manager who just wants the hard and fast, quick and dirty results of what's going on, you can narrow this down to just say that we've got, you know, 15 issues of this type. Here's your report. If you're really working with a details person who needs to know exactly what's going on and who's responsible, you can maximize everything that goes into this report to include as much data as possible. So again, circling all the way back to when I was first talking at the beginning about files, you know, we're just trying to give everybody the necessary tools that they need to have that centralized environment to push this project forward with as few issues and as few errors as possible. And this is what those sample reports come out to be. So this one has quite a bit of detail. I would say it's fairly middle of the road for what you can actually do on reports, but you're able to see exactly what the status of those issues are. and link back to the numbers. So if you're going to be keeping this attached on your computer and you're not going to be downloading the PDF or printing it out, whoever is looking at this report on the Autodesk platform has the ability to actually look at what the ID number is, or click on those placements and see exactly where it's linked to on a file. So those placements are actually going to be, when you create an issue, you go through and you select exactly where that issue is. You can attach it to, if you have any sheets or any files saved up in your Autodesk Docs platform, you can link this issue and say, okay, it's on the first floor drawings in the top right corner. That's where you're going to be seeing this. So just a very good tool to be able to pass things along and give people that full scope of what's going on here. Again, you can see it's also broken down into type and who it's assigned to, as well as that root cause. So that's going to show exactly what is going on and who's responsible for it and how soon we're going to be able to get that one resolved for you. So kind of a brief overview of what that report is going to look like, but largely it's just a very good tool for sharing and providing as much information to ownership and stakeholders as possible, just to expand that centralized environment. So we have you here. We're going to cover a few extra things. There are also 3 other components of Autodesk Docs, and that's going to be our members, bridge, and settings components. Now, these ones are going to be largely restricted to project administrators. Bridge may not be one that is frequently used, but settings and members are going to be something that allow you the ability to just kind of customize your platform to yourselves and also determine who's on a project and what their permissions are. So I'm going to pass the screen off to Melissa, and we're going to start talking about some members.
So members, bridge, and settings are the last 3. They're a little bit smaller, but equally as important. So here you can see we have quite a few members in this project. To add members, you just go in here and you can add as many members in the project as you can. Here, as we talked about in the whole presentation, you can assign permissions based on their company, based on their role, or just individual permissions for the individual emails. You have project member, project admin, and you can include these members in the different modules within Autodesk Construction Cloud, which is build, cost management, design collaboration, model coordination, takeoff, and auto specs. Shane, if you want to talk a little bit about bridge.
Yeah, so bridge is going to be how you're going to be sharing information across multiple projects. So largely it's going to be working through your Autodesk Construction Cloud. And it's going to kind of kick into the BIM 360 portion of things as well. So sharing that data up to BIM 360, which is going to be a little bit of a different module that we have within the Autodesk Construction Cloud. But it's essentially just a tool for you to link projects together and share information from one to the next. That way you're not constantly having to go back and kind of do a breakdown of how everything works from one to the other. You're able to share information. Just that way you're kind of cutting down the amount of work that you have to do, really, and feeding back into that centralized environment that we've been talking about. You're putting all of your projects kind of in the same sphere of influence, and they're all going to be in the same area so that you're able to look at the information one way across multiple projects. So Bridge can be a really powerful tool. It does feed in and out between Autodesk Docs and Autodesk Build into BIM 360. And you can see here, so it's going to keep all of your, going to keep track of everything that is kind of going from one project to the next and how it's, where it's at in that process. So who sent it, who they sent it to on a project, and where it's at in its process of being shared. So you can see all those ones have now been accepted and they've been pushed over to another project as well. And then just same thing in the inverse. You know, we've got things that have been shared back, exactly what the type of it is, and who actually decided that that was something that needed to come onto a project. Who sent it? You can see that, you know, Scott sent some to Vince sent some to himself, even because he was on a couple of different projects. So again, just a way to pass information back and forth without having to go through all of the extra steps of taking things down into your actual system and re-uploading them back onto the platform itself. And then in your settings module as well, some pretty straightforward information in here, really. So this one is one of those ones that is specifically limited to your project administrators. And there's really not a whole lot that you can change from this particular settings page. Now, your project admins and your account admins are going to have some extra permissions when they get into the actual project account settings. But when you're just looking at one specific project, you have the ability here to go on and change the name of the project and where it's located, as well as these timelines of the start and the end dates. When you get down below, you're also able to change the project number and what the project type is. One important thing to note is as you start building up your Autodesk Docs platform or your build platform and you start setting these projects up, you're able to set them up using a project template. And so what that's going to do for you is automatically preload files in. One example that I always use is OSHA sheets. You know, if you're supposed to be keeping certain OSHA sheets listed in your job trailers on site, put them in your files folder. Make those automatically upload as soon as you create a project so that people aren't having to hunt those down later on. So if you do in fact use a project template to set this up, that is going to be the one thing within your project settings that cannot be changed. You can't retroactively go and change to a different project template. You can't add a project template if you didn't use one. Once that project is created, you're just up and running, and that's how that's going to go. So not a whole lot that you end up changing within this settings tool, but it is all going to feed back into your files and your reviews and your transmittals. It's going to automatically attach the name of the project and the address. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct information through here so your whole project is rounded out and really, really well completed for you while you're creating your reports and your issues and everything else. You'll also notice on here that we have the tab for the Revit Cloud model upgrade. And so what that's going to do, and I'm not entirely sure that this project has a Revit Cloud model attached to it, but if you are using BIM 360 or if you have a Revit model on here, perfect. We would be able to go on here and just push that into another version of it. So this is going to be really helpful to make sure that you're getting the most up-to-date information on that model possible. And you're also going to be able to use it in a different version. One thing to be careful about, and I'm sure if any of you have ever, spent a lot of time in Revit, you probably know it doesn't work retroactively. So if you upload a Revit 2024 project onto this platform and somebody only has Revit 2021, they're not going to be able to access that. They can't go from 24 to 21, only vice versa. But just another way that Autodesk Docs is designed to really upgrade everything and make sure that all of your information is up to date. You have optimal transparency and accountability for where you're at in the project and where that model is going to stand.
Yeah, another thing to note on the project settings general, this information will feed into the other aspects of the construction cloud, such as build, etc. So you have other modules in here that will take this information, such as photos, and it will give you the location of where those photos was taken. So this information is very important to have on here when you start a project.
Okay, so with settings, that's actually going to close out all the information that we have to cover on Autodesk Docs. So I'm going to pass this off to Lori, and she's going to help us into our next step of the webinar.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shane.